Okay, so they're finally in the damn school. Character arcs can finally be set up, insight can be gained on the characters, and the plot can finally progress. But first, we have to introduce a bunch of more characters that are aggravating to listen to. Okay, I gotta say it right now. Whoever wrote these characters in this show do not know how to write. Every single one of these teachers they introduce, just like the main protagonists, have one single random ass quirk and that's their entire character. You see, it was something you could shrug off in the last episode, but it gets exhausting when every character is like that. And when they're not carrying one random ass quirk, they're just blank slates or stereotypes of cartoon cliches without any personality at all. I shall now give you guys a quick rundown of every relevant character that's been introduced so far. This guy, the generic blacksmith dude, who sounds like he smoked an entire Marlboro factory.
So, let's start with attendance. My name is Boss Flux. I'm here. Going to call some of your names now.
This girl, who insults the main cast a lot, and since we hate the main cast, she is, by default, a likable character. This teacher, who is like the sexy demon teacher, I guess. Okay, you know what, this has to be some kind of self-insert fantasy character, right? Like, maybe one of the psycho-feminist writers, like, had a crush on one of their teachers as a kid, so they probably just slapped this into the show? I can't think of any other explanation, because you do notice that this character is more creatively designed than any of the other teachers, right? Anyway, oh yeah, this guy right here. This is the only character in this entire show that has anything close to an actual personality. I'm telling you right now, he carries the entire show, and I'll tell you why later. You know what, forget it, I'll give you some clip notes now. The reason why this character is likable is because 1. He goes through a relatable character arc regarding his insecurities. 2. He's the only character in the show that actually acts like a human being. Mostly, anyway. And 3, and this is just a personal pro for me, he eventually becomes a crossdresser. This is a positive point for me, because femboys are my fetish. Moving along with the roll call, the last relevant character to bring up, but definitely not least, is this dude, Professor Caraway. Who is, okay, you know what, we're gonna save him for later in this video. If you know the reason why I am, you already know where I'm going. Aside from establishing the teachers and extra characters, nothing important happens past the first episode aside from these 4 protagonists honing their skills in more boring tasks to become certified guardians. And I just realized, what exactly do these guardians do? There's a school for them, but you never really get an explanation on what they do exactly. Are they protectors of the land? Are they military soldiers for war? Are they just glorified adventurers? It's never really elaborated on, you kinda just accept the fact that that's what these characters want to be. Now, in this entry to the video series, I would like to display how bad the writing is in this show. In order to do this, I want to focus on the very first character arcs and conflicts that the 2 main girls need to overcome. You see, the writing in this series is not writing for the sake of making a good show. It's for the sake of projecting thinly veiled political propaganda. And I'm gonna prove that in this video. The main cast is wondering what they should focus on for the rest of their school years so they can properly sharpen their skills. For some idiotic, arbitrary reason, Rosemary damages her sword, so she's gotta go get the thing repaired. Meanwhile, Sage is conflicted regarding her magic practices. Apparently she's scared of getting into new magic because she's been practicing old magic for her entire life, and her mother hates new magic. Both of these characters have to complete their current conflict, but at the same time, they sift through a lot of boring nonsense too. A lot of cliched dialogue, a lot of groan-inducing antics, yada yada yada. They spend so much screen time on pointless, superfluous nonsense in the show. So much of it could be trimmed down to further the plot and actually make the show worth watching. But now that I think about it, if they actually did trim down the fat in the series, the episodes would probably only be like 4 minutes long. Anyway, let's start off with Sage's little arc, and then we'll move on to what Rosemary is about to deal with. Sage's current issues involve her interactions with old and new magic. The only thing that I said could potentially be interesting about this show. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this, provided it's going to make the show interesting finally. Spoiler alert, it's not. After a while, Sage returns to her family members briefly, and said family members decide that they would like to give her a tool to use new magic with. Sage is scared of this because she is a longtime practitioner of the old magics, and her mother would be very unhappy if she began studying in the new ways of modern abilities. She chooses an orb tetraspear staff thing and then returns home. Then she suddenly decides to be honest and say that she didn't want one. A little bit late, but whatever. Now, here's what I want to point out about all of this. Her conflict is a very, peculiar scenario. She specifically goes into detail about how her old practices and etc. make her get made fun of at school, and she forces herself into continuing to use these old practices for the sake of her mother's feelings towards it. But at the end of the day, her cousins talk her into trying it out and enjoying it. I'm sure you don't see anything interesting about that situation, so let me reiterate in more specific detail. A young, naive, impressionable girl is forced into old practices and mentalities, and she seems really interested in the new ways of modern life. She is scared of dabbling in these new progressive acts because her mom doesn't want her to. But her lesbian family members step in to help her get into it, so now she loves it. That's an awfully specific scenario, don't you think? Pretty specific? Oh, and just in case you think I'm reading too deep into the situation, this girl right here straight up says this.
Well, I mean, your mom wasn't always so conservative. Your mom wasn't always so conservative.
Okay, let's not beat around the bush and just say it. Surprise, everybody! The magic system in this show is not a mechanic that will make the world interesting at all. It's just a poorly written metaphor about the thought processes of conservatism and progressivism in real life. And that's soul-crushingly disappointing, because that's literally the only thing potentially interesting about any of the magic in this show. And, well, they threw it out like a used condom for the sake of shoving idiotic politics down your throat. It's unbelievable. And now that I think about it, I realize the character conflict that Sage moves through is really messed up if you think about it. You see, usually when these types of scenarios happen in kids' cartoons, the moral of the story is pretty much always to stick to what makes you unique, you know? Because the message is always to just stand out and be yourself and all that stuff, right? But since the writers are nutjobs who are only interested in pushing progressive nonsense, the message that the writers are putting in the show is that you shouldn't stand out. You shouldn't be unique or respect another person's uniquity. Just do whatever the hell is new and hip. If it's new, it's good. If it's old, it's evil and bad. Sage is straight up advised that old stuff is bad, and gets her bullied at school, and new stuff is good. And that's just it. In the previous part of the video series, I was actually praising the concept of old magic and new magic, because I thought it would serve to be an interesting concept that would add some flavor into the show finally. But of course it wasn't. It's just a cheap excuse for the feminist writers to slap more poorly written propaganda into the program. Okay, now let's move along with Rosemary's conflict, which is a whole can of worms in itself. Her issue is that she needs to get her sword repaired after she just broke it. She has a bump-in with this teacher, Professor Caraway, who turns out actually knew Rosemary's mother, based off of recognizing this sword that originally belonged to her mom, so they have a chat in private. And here we are, at the most controversial moment in this entire show. Now, I'm assuming like 99% of you guys know what we're about to get into, so I want to go ahead and say that my take on this situation is pretty much no different from everybody else's who's already covered this. Regardless, I'm going to do my best to try and give you guys a form of analysis that you haven't already heard. But before we get into this, I want to make something extremely clear, okay? I am not transphobic, I am not homophobic, I am not hateful towards any group of minorities or majorities or anything. In fact, the only people I really hate are idiots. Guys, trust me, I am not bullshitting you. I'm an African-American bisexual self-identified furry. I am the last human being on Earth that's gonna judge someone based off of their identity. Come on. Now that I've quickly gotten that out of the way, let's dive back into the scene. Rosemary finding out that Professor Caraway is old friends with her mom excites her and sparks massive interest in him, so they have a chat in private. During this exchange, Professor Carraway hands Rosemary an old photo book of images of himself and her mother back when they were kids. This scene should be furthering the plot of Rosemary's mother's past. This scene should be about getting Rosemary's sword repaired, but instead, the entire episode is derailed and stopped in its tracks because the professor decides to say this.
I'm transgender.
I don't know that word.
This guy goes into this completely out of place elaboration on what a transgendered individual is, and
I was born into a female body, but it wasn't the right body for me. So I used new magic to change it.
Cool. You can do that? Is that kind of transformation magic permanent?
I take a potion once a month to keep the spell active, which lets me be the real me.
there is so much to unpack in this situation. So please, bear with me as I do my best to try to address every single thing that is wrong with this scene. For starters, let's begin with Professor Carraway. I'm just gonna be blunt and tell you guys. I'm assuming everyone here already knows because I already posted a short video about it, and it's my most viewed video on my channel right now. This character is a self-insert of the creator of this show, Ray Rodriguez. He personally voice acts this character, and Mr. Rodriguez is also a transgendered male. This is his self-insert fantasy for ham-fistedly shoving more LGBT presence into the show. It has no place at all in this show, period. It's ham-fisted and unnecessary, it's disjointed and random, it doesn't do anything helpful for this show in any way, shape, or form. It's ham-fisted and unnecessary, in the sense that this random-ass information is shoved down your throat. I still don't know who this show is for, but there is no need to tell anyone of any age demographic this info. Younger people don't need to be lectured on this because it's completely irrelevant to the plot and world of this show. And older viewers don't need to know because they already know this shit. It doesn't do anything to help the show or make it more entertaining, in the sense that, regardless of the character's identity or gender, none of that matters because after this scene, this side character is still a bland cardboard cutout that lacks any design flair or characteristics. Your identity is not your personality. And lastly, and most importantly, it's disjointed as all hell. This is a TV show where a party of candy-colored protagonists use the power of magic and friendship to beat up the bad guys and solve all their problems. Why the hell is one random-ass character stopping the progression of this show to a dead halt to break out into a Wikipedia-level explanation on what a transgender is? After the explanation is brought up, the subject matter is almost completely changed, and Rosemary basically acts like she never learned it to begin with. Like, I'm not joking, look here. Look at the way Rosemary just verbally scoots on like it never happened.
Which lets me be the real me.
Oh, I'd give anything to know where she is right now.
I know. Me too.
Okay, next question.
The showrunners themselves treat this moment like something you should gloss over. It's insane! And on top of all this nonsense, would you guys like to know the saddest, most pitiful thing about this entire issue Rosemary is having? This scene exists for no reason, because at the end of this episode, the conflict is instantly resolved with an ass pull. This guy just uses his new BS magic to automatically repair the goddamn sword instantly. And this also brings up a question. What are the limits to new magic? Can you just do whatever you want with it? Why is there a blacksmithing subgroup in the school that serves to craft and repair weapons when you can just use magic to instantly repair it? The magic system in this show has no set limits. They haven't established any. So what? Can new magic just do anything? This moment right here is a perfect microcosm of every single thing that is wrong with this animated series. The entire show's quality starts off at generic and forgettable and only plummets from there because the creators wanted to project their ideologies and personal desires into the damn show instead of wanting to make, well, a good show. And that leads me to my big question of this entry into the video series. Why the hell is there so much LGBT and identity politics and societal inserts in this show? Okay, well, I know why. That's a rhetorical question. We all know why. But to be more specific, why is there so much of it when it doesn't do anything to make this show better? It does not enhance, improve, or even affect the plot or characters of the show in any way, shape, or form. In fact, all it does is just drag things down. Furthermore, Crunchyroll is a place made up of anime fans. It's not like we don't know what the hell a gay romance is. 99% of slice of life anime nowadays are just straight up softcore lesbian romances now. Many bystanders think that this show is just completely average at best, because on a surface level it looks like some super typical lame-ass Steven Universe wannabe. But if you look at this project from a creator's perspective, you'll realize that this show is extremely below average, because the very basic stuff that comes pre-packaged with this show's genre is ruined by ham-fisted identity politics lodged into this show. Everything that is standard that comes along with this show in terms of cliches and tropes is already forgettable junk that you've seen a million times over. But thanks to the psychos working on this show, even the basic like cliches and paper-thin world building is even worse as a result of it. The very simple message to children that is, be yourself and be unique, gone since the writers wanted to be woke. The magic system of the show that actually could have been interesting, gone, since the writers of the show twisted it into not even thinly veiled societal propaganda. The characters of the show that could have actually been interesting? Non-existent, because instead of writing them as interesting characters, they just projected the things that they like and don't like on these blocks of wood. Obnoxiously quirky girls, transgendered people, gay couples, one-dimensional toxic masculinity males, and the list goes on. Guys, I want you to think about that. Think about how embarrassing that is. The freaks who made this show couldn't even get basic shit from kids shows right in this. Do you guys realize that if you sat down and personally removed all of the feminist-induced nonsense in this show, that nothing in the plot would change? Literally nothing. I've only watched 4 episodes of this show as of the time of this recording, and so far I've learned more about the creators of this show than I have about the characters or the world. How sad is that? Like, actually, as a creator, how embarrassing is that? That your work says more about you writing it than the fictional world that you crafted. I am really afraid that the further I go down, the more sanity I'm gonna lose trying to pick apart all the show's flaws. Like one of those levels in Darkest Dungeon or something like that. But anyway, yeah, we might have covered the biggest elephant in the room in the show, but our work is still far from done. Stay tuned for the next part, where we cover why this show fails to discuss toxic males. To be continued in part 4.